introduce Reverend Lynn Rogers and Reverend Kris Miller. And they are going to be talking about many exciting and interesting things, whether it be, I'm not sure it's going to be twin flames or past life connections.
Never know.
I never know. So whatever it is, it's going to be wonderful, I'm sure. So one more time, let's welcome Lynn and Kris.
Yay!
I wanted to start out by showing the picture of my teacher, the late Jessica Madigan. And I wanted to talk about her because she never lost her faith in love. She was orphaned at birth. Her father died in an accident, and her birth mother of a fever. And so she was taken to an orphanage where a wonderful, loving man who was metaphysical, kind of like Daddy Warbucks. He was a trustee. He just took her home. And he gave her a wonderful life. But he was a very sensitive man, and during the at the eve of the stock market crash, he took his life. And she was orphaned again. But out of all these experiences, she was a seeker like us. And she found, she deeply sought, and she found particularly the work of Edgar Cayce. And her favorite talk was about close souls. No matter how lonely we might feel at a given time in our life, we are reassured to know that we have not only the love of the Creator and the love we give to bless others, but we each have a soulmate, we each have brother-sister souls, we each have animal familiars, and we each have a guardian angel. And those particular souls click with us the very best. And so Jessica talked about all of that. I wrote about it when I did my graduate work at Cayce's Institute about twin souls. But there is, from around the world, this eternal idea of a complementary soul and close souls. The Edgar Cayce readings even describe Jesus as coming from Emilius, who was an androgynous being along with Mary and brother-sister souls, and that they sort of, like us, came into the earth realm, angels having an earthly experience. And when it came time to come into human bodies, there were, for each angel soul, 5 Adams and 5 Eves in each of the races of the earth. So there's a part of our soul that went into each race, and we form like a 10-point, like a star. And we have some brother souls and sister souls and a soulmate. And of course, there are some karmic ones along the way too, but that's another talk. And there was, before we kind of became more solid, we went through Lemuria and Atlantis, and our thoughts were really powerful then, as we had free will to work with them. And we were interested in some of the evolving animal realms, and so parts of our very consciousness went into those forms. And I have 2 furry beings in my house that are part of me, I'm quite sure. Those cats. And so we're kind of going back and forth, but one of the most ardent believers in twin souls was a famous American author named Mark Twain. So Kris is going to share with you a little bit about Mark Twain and his belief in twin souls.
Okay, out of Jessica Madigan's book, written as Mylene, Twin Souls, The Eternal Love, Jessica wrote as follows about Mark Twain. It says, Mark Twain's many dreams centered around a young girl, whom he called by many names, according to the time and place of the meeting. Once he found her in a little town in Missouri. She was walking ahead of him on an old bridge, her head slightly bent. He caught up with her, and there was an immediate recognition and feeling of kinship there, as if they had known each other for all eternity. They spent the day together in a tiny Missouri farmhouse. A holiday turkey graced the red-checked tablecloth, and a sleek gray cat lounged lazily before an open fire. Finally, after a day of complete happiness, she left him, going through a door. He searched for her with a sense of overwhelming loss, but he was unable to find her. Perhaps this had been their most recent incarnation together. She had left through God's other door, that door called death. Again, after another personal tragedy in his waking life, he discovered her in a magnolia forest in what seemed to be Mississippi. The same sweet sense of kinship was there between them as before, but now he knew her by a different name. And as we go through our lives, we meet people who seem to have a connection to us, light up our lives, or seem very interesting and familiar to us as we go through these experiences, and we often wonder why. You know, what is that association? Some people might say it's we're seeing the God in the other person, the God in all people, the God of all faiths, the God of all creeds. And yet, these are mysteries, surprises for us. Where have we seen them before? And Lynn likes to refer to a movie about in heaven where before people and souls return, they're giving a forgiveness shot where they cannot remember.
Forgetfulness.
So we have to relearn these things and break down the barriers. But that knowing somebody, I think these are triggers to allow us to recognize that we are all one. You're all on this planet in different phases at different times.
Well, you know, with Mark Twain, he also dreamed that he was in Hawaii with his soulmate. He dreamed that they were older at the time of the philosophers in Greece. And so we do, in the reincarnational theory, we do change race at times. We occasionally change gender. Jessica felt we kind of had a polarity, like you and your soulmate, your one right here, maybe you're 60% feminine, 40% masculine energy, and your soulmate the reverse. And sometimes people are in a body form that's a little different than the essential polarity. It's all very complex as we journey along the path. Jonathan and David in the Bible, she felt, were an example of actual twin souls in which Jonathan, being a little bit more the feminine polarity soul, had come in the masculine vehicle as they were in that Old Testament experience. There are lots of examples of twin souls currently that I've researched. John and Yoko Lennon felt that they were twin souls. Even though they come from different races and parts of the world, they knew in their hearts that they were very close souls, and they did journey down to the Edgar Cayce Center to find out more about it, I heard. So there are so many examples in history. St. Francis and Clare are interesting ones because they were well-to-do kids of Assisi, kind of like Bay Area kids that we know in the 60s who said maybe getting all the material things isn't the answer. Maybe I want to be more like a Native American and live more simply. So they gave up a lot of their wealth and they started to serve the poor and they started to live a simple life together. And we live in Santa Clara Valley, we live near San Francisco. To me, these are really soulmates throughout the ages. And you can find the examples of it in lots of places. But how do we know, if we meet such a person, what would be some of the guiding aspects of it? So one of them is telepathy. That's a very, very big thing. You could have a soulmate separated from you now, not even living on Earth. But you and that person have that always connection. So if you wake up from a dream feeling a special feeling, or you are in a reflective moment and you feel the presence of someone, apparently when we sleep, we're back with that person in deep sleep. So we really never leave our soulmate. I know an example, one of the people who comes to our Vespers, and his soulmate went to the other side, and he knows a sister soul here, which in earthly terms, a brother-sister soul or sister souls can have quite a romance because it's about an eternal relationship, not an earthly one. So they would have telepathy with you. And also our bodies are just expressions of our soul. So there would be a real feeling of connection in your physical form. I think Kris is in my soul group, and when I met him, I thought, gee, he looks a lot like my brother who passed when he was 49. So there's that connection. You generally view life in a similar way. Your spiritual work would tend to be the same. and you have the same sole purpose throughout all of your lifetimes together. You would feel a oneness in your life, physically, mentally, and emotionally. A prominent writer who lost her husband of many years wrote that it was as if a portion of her body and mind had been cut off from her. So we had some other examples in the Mark Twain saga, so I'm going to let Kris start part of that, but
It's in the past life research and that and readings, Lynn has come to the conclusion that I was Mark Twain,
Or
which
knew him.
or knew him, was very familiar with him. And at first being skeptical of that, I thought that was a little, but then we start digging into pictures of Mark Twain's life.
Kinda look like him.
it was
And-
my Vanessa's friend Joey Furman, who's special needs, and he's so psychic. And he felt he might have lived before as Robert Louis Stevenson. And when he saw Kris, he said, "Oh, my old friend is back." So we started looking at it. We weren't sure. A lot of times it's either you or you lived a life like that.
So in looking at the pictures of Mark Twain and his son, Orion looks remarkably similar to my current son, Cameron.
Orion was
Yeah.
Twain's older brother.
Yes, and he was 10 years older than Mark Twain, and he had a number of experiences where he had started a newspaper, and he never really thrived in those, how do you say it, and before I go too farther, I must, for those that don't read a lot, Mark Twain is the one that wrote of Life on the Mississippi. He wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, and within that he had some moral messages that he was trying to communicate about race relations and treating others as you would treat yourself. And in my son's case, as Orion was not the best businessman in what he did, but he was a very good spirited person, cared about other people, and the similarities in facial structure and his, I guess, basic core spirit values seem remarkably the same. And my other son, Trenton, has a remarkable appearance similarity to Twain's 2-year younger brother, Henry, who Mark Twain had tried to initiate him into the life on the river. Is they had the steamboats, and in trying to encourage his brother along, he got him a position on a steamboat, and that steamboat had an accident in which his younger brother was seriously burned, and he before he passed, Mark went to visit him, and he just fell to his knees and was incoherent in grief that he had, I guess he felt misled his brother into this. And now I have 2 sons with me who are very remarkably similar in character and facial structures. And then there's the animal aspects of it. And Mark Twain had a remarkable affinity for cats. And he had one that was a big black cat. He said very velvety, and he said he was a gentleman and a noble cat.
A cat is a gentleman.
Yes, and
That's great.
In the last year, that cat has slipped over to my house.
yes, and here it started showing up at Lynn's house is this huge black cat. And Twain had mentioned that if you look closely at this cat, you'll see there's just a tinge of white fur on it, and this cat has a tinge of white fur on its stomach. And in his life as Twain, this cat had gotten lost, and Mark Twain was so concerned, he actually took out an ad, a full-page ad in a national newspaper, looking for this cat. If you find this black velvety cat, this gentleman
Call
of the cat,
Mark Twain.
please contact Mark Twain to see if he could return that.
Well, the happy
One
thing
of his
is-
favorite ones was an orange cat,
Oh, that's true.
which,
Good girl.
you know, Lynn has painted her pictures of the bright orange cat, which you may be familiar with. And this cat has kind of taken a liking to me. When I first met Lynn, this cat was pretty independent. And,
Like a mere pussycat.
and now I tell her that I've broken her cat. You know, become domesticated, does things of, you know, sleeping on you and being very loud, purring, etc. You know, it's this cat is like become my cat. And so this cat that was independent and outdoors all the time has become my familiar in this lifetime. So I was a little surprised when the black one came along. And so we get these familiarities, associations through different lifetimes, it would have seemed. And they're, I think, gifts from God, and if we can be
What is the
present.
definition of familiar?
Oh, a familiar is also used sometimes in magic or earth magic. The familiar helps you connect, to me, helps connect to the whole realm of nature. And if you're doing affirmations or you're working with earth magic, to have your special animal soulmate with you, it strengthens your ability to do that kind of healing earth work. So that's how I see it. We're using these as examples, using Twain as an example to show that in our lives we might have, say, we might have a son who sort of feels like our older brother telling us what to do at times. And all of our relationships that you have, if you think about your close relationships, be that a marriage or parental or whatever, you'll realize that at times there's an undercurrent of another relationship. You know, it's like a mother and a son, but sometimes they feel like they're the same age. And it's my daughter Vanessa feels, I think, with my mother in a very recent lifetime. And so, and really helped me advance in the arts and things. So it's returning that now. So your soul, your close souls aren't only the true light soul and running off in the sunset. Your soulmate might be with you all the time in spirit, or could be in your life, and could be in your life as a relative. When Mel was talking about his mother, I just felt, oh, the way he speaks about her, this is a close soul in his eternal soul family, and that he would probably know her again and again, as Mark Twain did, you know, in some form. So it's, if we also wanted to open it up, I know our time is not very long, but if you had 30 seconds, a minute, if you want to say something about an angel or a soulmate or an animal in your life, you don't have to, but you can. We just wanted to open that door. Yes, Joan.
So I was determined to take Earl to Hawaii after we met and got married. And he did not want to go. He did not want to go, but we went because I wanted to, right? It was a terrible trip, and I ended up, and he said yes, no, and maybe the whole time we were there. I ended up crying on New Year's Day. So that was New Year's. On Valentine's Day, I said, God, tell me what that was about. And this whole picture of, he was a Baptist minister and I was a cute Hawaiian girl that led him astray.
She led me astray.
Was there a hula involved?
And I'm still leading him astray.
Quite a few of you remember a dear friend of mine, Byron Floyd. And Byron Floyd was this gorgeous black man. He and I met, and neither of us could understand what happened, but Byron and Dottie just went click. And wherever one of us was, usually the other one was close by. And in fact, one of the reasons that I am now a minister is because this was what Byron wanted in his life, was to go into the ministry. And when you have that connection with somebody that's so different than you are, and yet you feel lost without them. And that's what happens when you find a soulmate. Quite often people think, well, maybe we're gonna look alike, or we're gonna remember having been a mother and daughter, or something like that. But for me and Byron, we didn't know when we'd known each other, but we knew we had. And I think that's one of the most important things, is realizing when you meet somebody that there's a connection, that you want to spend a lot of time with that person. Please do, because you're going to think of it as one of the best relationships in your entire life.
So the love of your soulmates, your angel, your animal familiar, it doesn't end. Because we don't end. The Cayce readings say life is continuous. It's purposeful. And we're on a journey, and all of us in this room this morning have probably been together in another temple or gathering somewhere in time and space. And that's why we're here. Carl Jung talked about coincidences. When close souls meet, oftentimes they're more than average coincidences. And you look back and you say, we almost could have met there, or we almost could have met there. Or, my aunt has the same name as that town. So if you think of coincidences and things that draw you together, in the case of Kris and myself, he came down in 1982 to one of Jessica's conferences on a motorcycle, and I had just met Joe, and he was interested, I guess, and someone said, oh, she's with Joe. But when I met him again, he had a program from the Asilomar. So we are souls who have a purpose to cross our paths again. And that's how things can happen with close souls.
And as Mark Twain had daughters. He lost one daughter to meningitis and another daughter that had seizures. And in this lifetime, Lynn has a daughter with ataxia. She cannot walk, and is physically limited, and yet the similarities to what I experienced as Mark Twain. There was another incarnation that we stumbled across, is Robert Walker, the actor who was in Alfred Hitchcock's movie Strangers on a Train, and he was raised in Utah and had experiences there, and went on and met a young woman, a fellow actress at a acting school, and got married, and they came out to California, Hollywood, and one of the directors there was interested in his wife, and he broke up their marriage and their two children. Anyway, Robert was upset with that, and those feelings and emotional seem to carry over into this lifetime, unexplained, how would you say it, feelings and experiences, why I was cautious about not wanting to go to Hawaii, like some people might have experienced, carried over into this lifetime. And knowing what this past lifetime experience was has helped me to understand some of my trepidations in this lifetime and helped to put them behind me. Hopefully I've grown enough to get beyond those.
So sometimes a past life experience can trigger a karmic feeling. All of a sudden you're just washed over with feelings not just from this life, but a wound from the past comes up. So when Kris had a similar circumstance and an acrimonious divorce and two little boys again, those emotions come back, because Walker, if it was he or the pattern he lived, Walker's life was cut short. And sometimes we come back, he was born in the same area, in the Pasadena area, and we meet and walk through those difficult experiences. If Jessica had given way with the losses she experienced, loving Cayce's work, she was immediately recognized by his son as a wonderful lecturer for the work, and she was contributing in the Cayce's Twin Soul secretary. She said she did tremendous things for the Cayce work. But there came a point where when the son was married and Jessica was married and would travel, and they would have such animated discussions. I interviewed a young woman who had hysterical blindness who said that she would sit at the table and they would talk about the fine points of the reading. Jessica felt that this son of Cayce could be one of her very close souls. And he challenged her to, since she was so psychic like his father, to have some dreams and and she started to tune into lives they had shared. And that was a little bit much for him. As legend has it, when they were traveling once, he said, Jessica, when I married my wife, I took a vow never to tell another woman I loved her. Well, there is a woman in California. Well, she knows how I feel. But when Jessica's charisma and warmth and more of the New Age attitude that we share here kind of butted up with some conservative elements, it was very easy for him to let her kind of be put out, in a sense, to go on her own way, which turned out to be a wonderful thing for the young people in California who found her at Asilomar. But it was another loss, and she had dreamed that she had been in China and had been the young mother of twins, married to Cayce's son, and the older son, and that it was a marriage, a very happy marriage, but it was the custom that he had to marry someone else. So he took her older sister as a wife, and she was so upset that she took her life, which led her to have that experience with her foster father. One of the things, though, through all of it, it deepened her understanding of the karmic patterns we have, and she never lost her faith in love. And so I really encourage us now, as we go forward,
Right about time.
I'm concluding,
Yeah.
in my life, that we also think about the loving comfort that our relationship to Mother, Father, Creator gives us, to sharing love every day that brings us blessings, but also know, either with you or watching over you or yet to meet you is your soulmate, your brother, sister souls, your animal familiars, and most importantly, your guardian angel. So we thank you for letting us share with you today. Happy Valentine's Day. Thank you.
And I